Hello, wonderful debaters, and welcome to this video on how to write a contention. So there's 3 really important steps that I'm going to go over in this video. Hopefully they help you. This should be one of the first videos you watch because writing a contention, regardless if you're working on your affirmative or your negative case, you're going to need to know how to write one. So the first of the 3 key steps I want to talk about is the claim. It's 2 to 3 sentences saying what the contention is. Now, sometimes your tagline, so just like your first line of your contention, could really be the whole thing and you don't need any more if it's something simple. But if it's something a little more complex that you feel like your judge might need a bit more of an explanation or your opponent might need a bit more of an explanation and you know that they'll ask about it in cross-ex, it's okay to give an extra sentence or 2 just explaining what something is. My recommendation is, at minimum, just your tagline. Maximum, it needs to be 3 sentences. Maybe 4, but that's pushing it. You don't want to waste too much time because typically your judge is going to be able to understand what it is. But sometimes you can have a bigger one. But that's where it's helpful to have someone else helping you and you can really talk to them in person because a lot of this is going to be based off of what the case is because everything changes on a case-to-case basis, but a good recommendation and a good place to start would be 2 to 3 sentences. An example of a claim would be this: universal basic income, which is meaning that every household in the United States would get a simple basic income per month or possibly per year, and everyone would get the same. So for example, $1,000 a month, meaning $1,000 would be sent to every household every month to make sure everyone has some sort of means of living. UBI will end end capitalism. That's a tagline. Now, in this particular case, I went on and I explained what capitalism was. I gave a definition and like an example, I think. And so it ended up being actually, I think, 4 sentences total, which was okay and it was good. And I avoided having to answer any capitalism questions in cross-ex. But if I hadn't explained that, it's possible that my opponent knew what capitalism was, but it's also possible my opponent didn't know. The second point that's really important is called your warrant. Now this is going to be your subpoints, or at least this is how I like to think of it. It's your subpoints, your evidence. It basically needs to be this source says this is good or this is bad because so-and-so, blah, 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 said this, and this, and this, and this. It can go a lot of different ways, your evidence. You really just need to pick what's going to work best for your case and what works with your contention. Because something that's really important, your subpoint needs to fit with your tagline because if it doesn't, it's just a mess and it doesn't make sense and your opponent will call you out on it and the judge is going to get confused and it's just not good. So it's best to make sure that everything fits together. If you end up having a subpoint that has so much evidence and there's so much that goes with it and there's so much to unpack, it's probably best to either take it out and just have it as an extra card, make it shorter and keep the extras as a card, or you can just make it its own contention. If there's really that much there, you want to dive into it that much, and so it's probably going to be more beneficial to just make that its own contention and have its own subpoints. Now, it's good to have 2 or 3 subpoints. Typically, you won't hear more than that per contention. Sometimes if someone has like 1 contention, you could hear them get to subpoint all the way from subpoint A to subpoint F. You know, it's totally possible, but we typically recommend A through C, maybe A and B. Usually don't go with 1 because then there's just not that much evidence there and it's really easy to take down. It's probably best to have 2 or 3, maybe 4 if 1 is short, but I would stick with no more than 3. And you do that per contention, and that's also going to help you time-wise. Length for these, I can't really give you a good estimate because it really depends on your source. You know, some sources are concise, 3 sentences, boom, done, explained, you've made your point. Some sources are a little more complex and you need like a couple paragraphs to explain, and that's okay. No one's gonna get mad at you for talking about something for a long time. It just means you're gonna have to allow for that later on so that way you don't go overtime. So you need to make sure that you really think about and make sure that your words are as concise as possible so you can pack in as much information, but you also need to make sure your information is explained well. And the third and final point that is really important for writing a contention is called your impact. This is going to be the last thing you're going to want to talk about. It can really be split up in a lot of different ways. What your impact is what does your claim and warrants do for or to society? You can explain that, if this happens, we can see that this will happen because of this evidence, meaning it's better for society because it'll improve quality of life, and that's the greatest good for the greatest amount of people, which could potentially be your value criterion of utilitarianism. You need to explain why that's going to be good, or if you're having a negative argument, you need to say why it's going to be bad. You just need to make sure you explain the impact, what it's going to do to people, how it's going to affect somebody. That's really, really important to focus on, because judges, that's how they're going to weigh it. So I hope this video was really helpful. You might have to watch it a few times as you're writing just to make sure you get it all down. But always remember, when you're going through contention writing, especially when you're first starting out, is claim, warrant, impact. It's going to get you amazing places. You're going to have enough evidence. You're going to have enough explanation, and judges are going to understand what is going on and how this could impact society. So make sure that you understand everything in this video. Watch it a couple times as you're writing your case. I think it'll really help you out. And keep watching these videos so you can keep getting help.